Hey you guys, what's up? Just got finished teaching my in-person classes for Tuesday. So I've just finished up meeting with you guys if you came on Tuesdays, if you're attending that section. So what I want to do in this video is kind of recap some of the stuff that I've been talking about in-person classes, and then also explain the assignments that I have created for you to do this week. So last week, every section that met last week, I talked about a book called How to Read Like a Professor. And I've made this distinction several times now, so I kind of feel like I'm a broken record because I've said this in class a bunch of times and now I'm saying it on the video, but I have wanted everyone to understand this distinction that we often make about reading and then reading like a professor. So basically everybody has this skill to read. Like, you can pick up any artifact that has words on it and you can tell me what those words are. So reading is one thing, but reading like a professor, which is the title of that book, calls for a separate set of skills rather than just recognizing words and sentences. It asks us to understand meanings and significance and understand when an author is making a metaphor or when they are using historical context to make a claim about something in the present. That's a deeper kind of reading than just surface level reading. I often really think about it like that. There's a surface to a text, that's its plot, and this can be a book, film, song, poem, advertisement, anything you're looking at, you can look at it at the surface. But there's a second way of understanding something, and it's looking beyond what you see literally and understanding what might be present metaphorically. So that's really what I think about when I think about reading like a professor. Now, the second part, I talked about that a lot in the last class, but today and on Thursday, I'm going to talk about the skills that it takes to be able to analyze. So reading like a professor and analyzing for me are kind of the same thing. Thomas Foster in How to Read Like a Professor says that professors are good at reading because we can recognize patterns and significance and connections between texts. Like, that's what he says the skills you need to be able to read beneath the surface, is recognizing those patterns. And you did that with that first assignment. This assignment this week is asking you to think about, why would we do that work with fiction? So imagine if you can analyze anything, as the authors of that I quote in our discussion post today insinuate. They make the case that you can analyze somebody's bad mood. You often ask why people make decisions, such as becoming a vegetarian or changing their career. Those are some examples they give. That we as humans are always asking why. So even though it takes practice to read like a professor, to go back to Thomas Foster, we're all naturally inclined to still question things. I've used this example a couple times already, but if you've ever been around a little kid that's like, why do we have to do this? Or why is the sky blue? Or why do we blah, blah, blah? Why do I have to wear shoes? Just crazy things that kids often ask. I think that really points to an innate desire of understanding understanding context and meaning and symbolism. We're questioning that just in our nature. And that's a given at this point. In this class, we've decided that asking why and analyzing is worth it. But now I'm gonna ask you to think in another direction. Not only is asking why about your mom's bad mood or somebody's decision to move to another country worthwhile, like real things, we need to consider why it's worth our time to analyze fiction. So in your discussion post for this week, it's discussion 1.2, I think is what it's called. I'm asking you to stretch yourself a little bit. And I give some reasons why I think reading fiction matters. One of them is that I think it gives you the ability to empathize. And empathize means to think about something from someone else's perspective. So for me, reading literature does that. It lets me imagine the lifestyle of someone completely different of me. Just like different race, different gender, different culture, different time in history. You know, you could read about someone who lived during World War One. That was 100 years ago. Like, what was different during World War One that would have affect someone's experiences, you know? So you can read about all these different contexts and learn about different people and their decisions and their identity. But there are other reasons too. Reading fiction helps to complicate things that we may see as binary, you know. So you hear people say family is everything. You've probably heard that phrase, my family is everything. Well, that's good, but that's a binary. When do you have to betray your family for your religion? Because isn't your religion also everything? Or your allegiance to your government or your state? Is that what is everything? How do you pick those things, right? That's not easy to decide where your allegiances lie. Lots of people have different ones. Now, some people might say my allegiance to my family and God is the same thing. Okay, that's a separate argument too, but like we have to construct that worldview. And fiction can help us ask those hard questions and help us not see things as just one or the other, but making a composite of like a philosophical composite that understands of a worldview. That's, again, I've described this discussion post as like the difference between running a marathon versus lifting weights. You know, when you go do lift weights, you do that pretty quickly. Like you may do your squats in like a minute, you know, if you're doing 5, you know, but they're really heavy. Whereas if you run a marathon, you're running for like 2 hours. So this discussion post is like lifting weights. It is heavy. It's not very long what I'm asking you to do, but I am asking you to think, okay, how is the text that we're looking at in class reflective of those qualities that you can gain from reading fiction? Like, am I learning something through a film that's fictionalized that I hadn't thought about just in its real reality? So that's one assignment. You can do it. Just do your best. The second part of this week's work is getting ready to write that paper. So I've made the essay prompt and I posted it. So you can go ahead and look at the essay prompt. It's not due. I think it was, I don't have my calendar right here, but I think it's the 21st or something like that. Look on the schedule. The essay's due in several weeks, but we're already starting the essay building process this week. I always have students work way ahead. You won't write the paper the night before my class ever because we work on it in class. So that's what this next part of your assignment is. And what I'm having you do might be a little unconventional. When you start writing a paper ordinarily, you probably just start writing your introduction and then you finish with your conclusion, top to bottom. And I'm not asking you to do that. Instead, I'm asking you to pull evidence or details out of the text that are reflective of whatever trope you're going to write about first. So you're picking one of the tropes off the list of, I think there's 12 or 14 or something like that on the essay prompt. You're picking one of those. And then what you're doing for essay building part 1 is finding 6 specific details from the film where you think that trope is present. This is a moment where you're most likely going to have to rewatch some scenes from the film. You might either have to rent it again to do that. You may be able to find some scenes on YouTube that help you do that, but your details are going to be really specific. Okay, this moment right here, this image, you know, we practiced this in our last discussion, finding details. This is exactly that, but you're finding 6 for one trope. These details that you pick right now will eventually become evidence in your body paragraphs when you write the paper later. And also, I forgot to say this, the other discussion that you're doing this week, discussion 1.2, it might end up being part of your conclusion because you're making some overarching claims about significance of the film. So both of the assignments that you're doing right now, think about them as pre-writing. Think about them as something that you'll recycle and turn in formally later as your official essay. So I hope that all makes sense and helps. I'm sorry this video is a little bit later than I meant for it to be, but I think it'll still kind of help you once you get started on this work for this week. So I'm here if you have questions. Please let me know if I can be helpful in any way, and we'll check back in next week.